Daily Wellness community, I have a fun and spicy episode for you today. Just a heads up that you will likely only want adult ears on this one. I've invited Carlie Palmer-Webb to share her top 5 tips for a healthy sex life. She is a Christian sex educator and researcher, and I asked her to come on because if your sex life isn't good in your marriage, it can have negative impacts on your health, such as your mental health and your stress levels. And you could switch that as well. If your physical health isn't good, it can affect your sex life, such as low libido, low energy, and sickness. So in my mind, this is very much a health and wellness topic. And I absolutely love her 5 tips. There's always ways that we can grow and learn when it comes to sex. And that's just what this episode helps us do. Welcome to the Daily Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Meredith. I've led my family on a transformative health journey for over a decade, and now I help other families do the same. So this is a place where you can learn about healthy living and take the next step in your wellness journey. Hey, Daily Wellness listeners, have you ever wished for specific guided help with your health journey? Maybe you need someone to teach you about menu planning or how to get your whole family on board with healthy eating. Maybe you need recommendations for non-toxic cleaning and personal care products so that you can finally make the switch. Now, you and I can chat one-on-one about whatever health topic you'd like. For more details and to schedule, go to dailywellnesscommunity.com/coaching. Now back to the episode. Carlie, thanks for joining us on the Daily Wellness Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, I am curious and excited to chat with you today and see what you've come up with. And when I emailed you, I said, I know this might be hard, but do you think we could do something around like 5 tips, for having a healthy sex life? Or is that what I said?
Yeah.
Okay, is that the way I worded it? Yes.
Yep.
5 tips for a healthy sex life. And I said, I know it might be hard to narrow it down to 5, but you let me know what you think. So you think you've come up with 5?
Yeah, I mean, it was hard to narrow it down, but we've got 5. Hopefully they'll be good ones.
Okay, awesome. Before we get into that, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us why you do what you do?
Yeah, so my name's Carlie Palmer-Webb. I'm a sex researcher and educator, and I do what I do mostly because I was so desperate for this information earlier in my life and just didn't have resources. So I decided that somebody should probably do something about that. And eventually that led to me deciding that I would be that somebody. So here I am.
Yeah, you do an excellent job, like just on social media, just the education that you put out there for free for everyone. I'm like, this is great, like for people can just come and like, oh yeah, I should learn about that, or I should learn how to teach my kids about that even. I love how you talk about that, but was it awkward making reels about sex to begin with, or?
Oh, totally. No, there's still days when I'm like, my job is so weird, but I love it.
Like, did I really just say that on social media?
Yes, totally. Especially with my background, like if my friends, well, I actually am still in contact with some of my friends from high school, and they're so confused. Like, how did you end up doing this? Because I was so shy and so timid and very uneducated and naive. And so it's been a fun journey, but I really do love it.
I love it. That's so fun. All right, well, let's get to it. 5 tips for a healthy sex life. What did you start with?
Okay, so the first one that I made note of, which is maybe sounds a little less boring, or no, maybe sounds a little more boring, I guess, than the other ones. But the first one I wrote is to prioritize affection and kindness outside of the bedroom. Oftentimes, I will work with couples who feel like their sexual relationship is the most problematic part of their relationship. It's the main pain point, and they really want help figuring that out. But they're also in a place where they're really struggling to interact the way that they want to outside of the bedroom. It's really difficult to create a good sex life in an unhappy relationship generally.
Yeah.
So my first tip for good sex is to really prioritize your relationship outside of the bedroom. Practice being kinder to each other. We all could improve in that regard, right? With our partner or our spouse. Try to be kinder. Try to show more affection outside of the bedroom. Offer them more of their love language outside of the bedroom. And then we can start addressing things within the bedroom.
Yeah, I think that's so good. Such a good place to start. And I think like you don't often connect those dots of like, oh, my sex life is this one thing, right? And it's like categorized in this box, right? And we don't connect the dots of how all these other things play into it. So I think that's a really wise place to start. It makes me think of one thing that I've been trying to be intentional about in my relationship with my husband. And it was something I heard from a pastor actually teaching on marriage. And he was saying that if you ever have an encouraging thought cross your mind, speak it out loud. Like, don't ever let a positive or encouraging thought go through your mind about your spouse without saying it out loud. Like, why would you withhold like a good word of encouragement, right? Or affirmation. And I was like, that's so true. I think like my husband last week did just such a good job of engaging our kids in the evenings and playing games and stuff. And I thought to myself privately, I'm so glad he's doing it. That's so great. Like that he's, spending time with them and being intentional. Never said a word to him until I heard that. And I was like, oh, I need to be mindful of that.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it is easy to do that, just to think positive things and go about our day, especially if it's something that we've told our spouse before. We're like, oh, they know, we've talked about this already.
Yeah.
But it really does make a big difference to hear those kinds of things, especially from the person that is your closest companion, your best friend. It's a big deal. So I like that.
Yeah, that would also encourage you just to take initiative on that. If it's the husband or the wife listening right now, like you take initiative to do that. Like don't wait for the other person to, start being kind, start being affirming, start using your love language or whatnot. But you take initiative to do that because I know sometimes I'm just stubborn and I'm like, well, he hasn't been very nice lately. So I'm just going to be very nice. And you get into a really ugly cycle like that. So sometimes you just have to be the bigger person, and be the brave, vulnerable one and do the kind, nice things. Yeah.
Absolutely. You are not alone. All of us get into that space.
Yeah.
But it does make a difference for one person to make a change.
Yeah.
Your choices, your changes can impact the feeling of your relationship so much, even if your spouse isn't quite there with you yet, or you don't feel like they are.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Perfect. I love it too. Good number one.
Great. Ready for number two?
Yes.
The second one was to make your sex life a consistent topic of discussion.
Ooh, I like that.
A lot of couples are kind of either uncomfortable talking about their sex life outside of the bedroom, or they don't feel like it's really necessary, so they don't very much.
Yeah.
I think that you should have purposeful conversations or check-ins about your sex life regularly. I would say at least once a month, at least. Talk about how both of you feel like it's going. Are you happy with our sexual relationship right now? What are things that we could do to improve it? What could I do to help you feel more loved and cared for in the bedroom? And just talk those things through. Frequency is obviously something that most couples need to talk about in those check-ins as well, because almost all couples have a discrepancy in desire. So you'll need to also talk about, how often do you really want to have sex? How often do I really want to have sex? And how can we kind of come to a middle ground where we both feel loved and cared for and not pressured into something, right? That's my number two.
Yeah. If someone's not used to that and it feels really awkward, like how would you recommend starting that conversation?
Yeah. The general conversation or the frequency conversation?
I guess just general, just talking about sex in general with your partner. Yeah.
I think saying exactly how you feel about it can help break the ice really well. So just saying like, hey, I was listening to a podcast today.
Yes, use the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. They recommended that we have a check-in about our sex life more frequently. I'd like to have that with you, but I'm going to be honest, I feel a little bit awkward about it.
Yeah.
Are you open to talking about it? Just start there.
Yeah.
They feel a little awkward about it, right? Just kind of break the ice and then start with some simple questions. How do you feel our sex life is going? What are some things that you think we could do to improve it? And then both answer those. And usually with those prompts, you'll get into a lot more, like other things will come up. You can get into a deeper conversation.
Yeah, I think that's great. That doesn't seem awkward at all when you put it like that.
Yeah. I also think it's important to remember that having those conversations right before a sexual encounter, right after a sexual encounter, or during does not work very well. Emotions are high. One of you or both of you might be frustrated. This might, if it's like your spouse just tried to initiate and you really don't want to have sex right now, that's probably not the ideal time to have the conversation about like how frequently you should have sex.
Right.
Have that conversation when both of you are in a good place emotionally, like completely separate from a sexual
like in a neutral time and place, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. On a car ride or something, just make sure that you're in a good place before you try to address a topic that can sometimes be pretty emotional.
Yeah. And if you do have like some concerns, are there some tactful ways to like not come off as offensive or hurtful or things like that?
Yeah. I think the way that we approach these conversations makes a really big difference. So even just expressing, I have a concern about our sexual relationship that I want to share with you, but I really care about your feelings. I really like to make you happy. So sharing these kinds of things is hard for me. I want you to know that I love you and that I'm not saying this to be hurtful, but I am saying it because I need you to understand my experience.
Yeah. I think everyone's getting out the pen and paper right now. Gonna rewind the podcast and just write that out.
It makes a difference. I also think that coming into this conversation with a really open heart is a big deal. Being willing to listen. Because I know for me, when my husband says something that he maybe wishes we could change about any area of our marriage, but maybe especially sex, because that's really vulnerable.
Yeah.
My first instinct is often to defend myself somehow, like, wait, no, I don't do that, But then we miss really understanding our spouse's experience. So try your very best to listen and to ask follow-up questions and to let them really share their experience. Try to understand first before you share your thoughts or your side or, defend yourself if necessary.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I have no research to back this up. So you tell me from your experience if this is true, but I'm guessing like if for example, if I'm coming to my husband with some concerns, it's likely that we've gotten to a place where he also has some concerns and we just haven't talked about it,
Totally.
So having that like open-handed approach, where you're willing to give and receive feedback.
Yeah.
Would be such a gift, right?
Totally. I love that. I also think that it's easy to demonize the experience of our spouse, or even just to feel like your experience is the right one and their experience is bad somehow. I see this a lot in desire, frequency of having sex conversations, that the lower desire partner will feel like the higher desire partner only cares about sex, or all they want is an orgasm. They don't really care about connection, or they just want it way too much, and that's a bad thing. And vice versa, like my lower desire spouse doesn't actually want to be with me, and they don't love me as much as I love them. And like, it's just so easy to attach negative meanings to our spouse's experience. And I think that's another part of listening intently to their experience, is to try and practice the thought that their experience is okay. It's okay for them to have really high desire. It's okay for them to have really low desire. It's okay for them to have this specific desire in the bedroom. It's okay for them to feel really frustrated about this without letting your mind attach negative meanings to everything that they share. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I'm like, ooh, yeah, it would be so easy to take this personally.
Yeah. Yeah, sex is vulnerable. It's one of the things that can make it so beautiful and so bonding.
So true.
But it's tricky too.
Yeah. So number 1, affection outside the bedroom.
Yeah.
Number 2, talk about it regularly.
Yep.
And number 3.
Yes. Number 3 is work together to identify and schedule a frequency that works for you.
Okay.
And I know that some couples are like super not into scheduling sex. They don't think it's sexy. They don't think it's fun. That's totally okay. I'm not saying we need to schedule it for like every Monday night or whatever. If scheduling it on specific days doesn't work for you, that's okay. But I do think that in order to really prioritize it, especially when you have kids and you're really busy and it sometimes gets put on the back burner, I think you need to talk specifically about how often you would like to have sex.
Mm-hmm.
Again, kind of finding a middle ground. And then think of times in your schedule where it would work to have sex.
So are they not necessarily what day of the week, but what time of the day works for us? Yeah.
Right. Like some people are like, please do not initiate after 9 p.m. Like I am dead to the world at that point. Please don't. And that's a discussion that you should have. That maybe a better time would be first thing in the morning, or do your kids have a nap window, or are they at school at a certain time? Do you have a lunch break that works better? Sunday afternoons, just think of times, discuss times together that would work to have sex. And it doesn't mean you have to have sex every time that window comes, but you should know good and less good.
Yeah, times that would be optimal for you, times that would be optimal for your partner. You can compromise. You can kind of know each other's expectations. I think a lot of frustrations come out of just not knowing and not talking about expectations.
Yeah, totally. And there we are at the communication again.
Yeah.
I'm going to go over this in your sex check-in. It's going to be great. So that's number 3.
That's a great idea.
Number 4 is to be a gracious receiver and a generous giver.
Mm.
This model, of course, works best when both partners are very much on the same page. A good sexual relationship requires that both spouses or partners' experiences are prioritized, that they are viewed as equally important, that my spouse's pleasure, my spouse feeling loved, is just as important as me feeling loved and my pleasure, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So oftentimes we'll see this dynamic where one person feels like they're most often giving. They feel like sex is mostly for their spouse and not so much for them. And they have a lot of guilt asking for more in the bedroom, more time, more pleasure. Because I work primarily with women, I'm hearing it mostly from women, but it's not only their experience, right? It can happen in any relationship for any partner. But we have to find a way to be gracious receivers and generous givers. And one thing I want to mention on that is when we're trying to find a balance of prioritizing each other's pleasure and love and experience, we're not looking at a balance of time. Because, for example, we know that men, on average, take 3 to 5 minutes of stimulation to experience an orgasm, whereas women take, on average, closer to 15 or 20 minutes. So for both of them to experience the height of sexual pleasure, it will take a lot more time spent on the woman's pleasure than it will on the man's.
Right.
But their pleasure is equally prioritized, right? So it's not always, it's not like, okay, we'll focus on your pleasure for 5 minutes, we'll focus on my pleasure for 5 minutes, and we'll call it a day, you know? And it doesn't always have to be balanced in one sexual encounter, right? You can say, okay, tonight, I just really want to spoil you and totally focus on you. And you can do that. You can have a sexual encounter that's really focused on one person's pleasure and experience, as long as that's not every single time, right? Overall, there's a good balance.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does make sense. I think there's been a kind of a teaching, or I don't know, this belief going in around Christian women, especially, that women just need to be there for their husband, you know, whenever the husband wants to have sex. Doesn't matter how they feel about it, you know, they just need to have sex whenever the husband wants to have sex. And I heard you talk about that a little bit. Could you kind of address that?
Yeah, I hear that frequently a lot because most of the people that I work with are Christian. And I think that's a really, really dangerous, unhealthy teaching. When we get into the space of duty sex, or feeling like you have to have sex either because that's your job as a spouse, or because you feel like if you don't, something bad will happen. My husband will look at pornography. My husband will seek it out elsewhere. My husband will be cranky, right? Any of those reasons leading to duty sex, they create a dynamic in a sexual relationship that isn't about love. It isn't about cherishing each other, expressing love for each other. It's about doing your job. Mm-hmm. And you just can't have a really happy, healthy sex life with that mentality. It takes away so much of the beauty of sex, but it also kills sexual desire.
Yeah.
If you're already someone who struggles with low desire, or feel like it's a problem that you have lower desire, and then you also feel like sex is your responsibility and it's the only way you can keep your spouse from acting out sexually, there is no desire, right?
Right.
Because it's not fun, it's not meaningful, it's not bonding, it's just an exchange.
Yeah.
And that's not what we want.
Yeah, you feel used at that point.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks for kind of touching on that. I just thought that would be a really great, I think just among women in general, like we know somebody, or we ourselves have experienced that. And I think it's something we need to talk about more.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. On the, I love how you worded that, gracious receiver and generous giver. I think that sometimes in my own experience that I'm afraid of, holding back, or, saying, I don't really want to have sex tonight. I don't feel like it, because I, was afraid that I was going to hurt my husband's feelings, or, that he was, wasn't really afraid that he was ever going to do something bad. But I just didn't want to cause like a rift in our relationship or hurt him emotionally, And so that's where that communication just comes back into play, right? Where if you have discussed your when is good for you and when is not good for you, and you both know, like in your heart to heart connection, like that we are both wanting to please each other, wanting to love each other well, then you're going to be able to be in those moments where it's just not a good time for you, and you're going to be able to say that, and it's going to be okay, Yes. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. Everyone should rewind that section and listen to what you just said. That's so good.
Yeah.
And it's a big deal.
Yeah. Something that we've had to grow in our relationship for sure. Just being able to get to that point of actually communicating and not just guessing what each other's thinking.
Yeah. Yes, totally. I think we're all working on that still. But with sex, it's so huge. And getting to the place where you feel comfortable saying no, and your spouse receives that well and knows that you still love them and care about them and want to be with them. You're just not up for sex right now. Right. That's a big deal. And it takes couples a long time to get there. So We all need practice, and it's okay.
But it's worth working towards as well. It's worth kind of going through those initial like awkward conversations or whatever you have to do, because it's so worth getting there.
I totally agree.
Yeah. Great point. Number 5.
That actually goes really well with number 5 because we talk about this.
Well, I didn't even know it.
But my last one is say no to pain, pressure, and punishment. So I'll just address pressure first because we're talking about that. By that, I mean we have to respect consent in our marriages. It has to be so important to us. So when our spouse doesn't want to have sex with us at any given moment, they need to know that they can say no and we aren't going to treat them any differently. We aren't going to be unkind. We're not going to pressure them into doing it anyway because we want to. We will be respectful of their decision and express our love to them, even if they don't want to have sex at that moment. So that's a big deal. Pain, say no to pain. A lot of women especially are pushing through pain with intercourse specifically. And that is problematic for a lot of reasons. One, sex is supposed to be awesome for everybody involved.
Yeah.
And if it's painful for you, you're prioritizing your spouse's experience high above your own. And while it is beautiful to care so much about their experience, completely negating your own is not helpful or healthy. The other thing to consider is that experiencing pain with sex and pushing through it often exacerbates the problem. So pain happens when our body is trying to tell us, it's trying to send a signal to our brain that something is wrong.
Right.
It's not just pain because that's how sex is. Sex should not be painful at any time for any person, right? If it is, there's a problem that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
And when you push through it, it trains your brain to expect pain with sex. And then it's more difficult to treat the problem because your brain just thinks sex is painful, sex is painful, sex is painful. And then it thinks that it it thinks it needs to send that signal continuously, even as you address the problem. So it really is, it's all around a bad idea. It's not kind to yourself to push through pain with sex, and it exacerbates the problem.
Yeah.
So if you are having pain with sex and you are able to reach out to a doctor, I highly recommend that you do. If you aren't able to do that, do as much research as you can online. There's a lot of really good resources for addressing pain with sex that you can start with. So I would encourage you to do that. It shouldn't be painful for you. And that also kills desire. Painful sex and duty sex are major desire killers.
Would totally agree. Yes.
Yeah. And then the last one, saying no to punishment. It is so easy to fall into a pattern where we use sex in our marriage as a reward for good behavior or a punishment for bad behavior.
Right.
It's easy to do that without even really meaning to, You're just laying in bed and your spouse kind of starts to initiate and you're like, no, you forgot to do the dishes today. Sorry, finish,
Yeah.
And so I would just encourage you to recognize in yourself if you start to do that and try to find ways to communicate what you're feeling with your words instead of using sex to communicate that you're unhappy or happy with your spouse. So if they start to initiate, for example, and you're frustrated about something that happened earlier, I would encourage you to say, I love you so much, and I actually could be open to sex at some point, but first, I just feel a little frustrated about this, and I don't feel like I can engage in sex right now, feeling this frustration. So can we work through this first and then readdress the sex thing,
Yeah.
Try to communicate it first instead of letting sex be your messaging.
Mm-hmm.
it's tricky not to ever do that. But we want sex to be something that is safe in our relationship. We want it to be an expression of love and devotion. We want it to be playful and enjoyable for both of us. And for it to be those things, we can't use it as a tool. Well, tool is the wrong word, because we can use it as a tool to help us connect, right? But we can't use it as a weapon.
There we go. Yeah.
When we use it as a weapon, it takes away the beauty of that relationship.
Yeah. You can give me your feedback on this, but I know my husband and I have really seen the kind of beauty and, gift that sex can be when we are in conflict with each other. If we're both willing to have sex, kind of, even though our conflict hasn't been completely resolved, then it does help us to come to each other more vulnerably, and reconnects us, helps us to bond, remember that we're on the same team, things like that, and then we can kind of readdress that conflict, from a little bit of a more compassionate lens, after we've had sex. So
Totally.
that's just, I don't know if that's something that you see consistently in your life or in people that you work with.
Yeah, no, I think that can absolutely be true. I talk often about how sex can be healing. And I think it can help heal these little rifts during the day.
Right.
And it definitely can help you get to a more compassionate place with your spouse. We just have to be careful with using this, just like we do. Like, we have to be careful to not pressure our spouse into sex, being like, no, we'll feel better if we, really, you'll probably be less mad at me after we have sex and it'll be fine, Yeah. Like, sex can be really healing, but you both have to be approaching it with, okay, we're feeling kind of disconnected, and both of us feel comfortable with and willing to have sex to try and heal some of that, and then we'll move forward. Yeah, you have to be having constant communication to make sure that you're both on the same page, and none of these things are turning into pressure for your spouse to behave in the way that you want them to.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance.
It really is.
Yeah,
it really is. And I will say again, walking that line, trying to find that delicate balance without verbally addressing it often is impossible. I just don't see it being possible at all to have the sexual relationship that you both really want, that is free of these negative things and abundant in the good things, without talking about it. So if you aren't talking about it, that really is where I would start.
Yeah. So true. And there may be a lot that you need to talk about other than sex, right? To be able to get
totally
that healthy sex talk. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. But it really can be so good.
Yes. Yeah. I love that vision that you cast for people, that just to know that it can be good. And I think that there's probably a lot of people listening thinking, I am so far from this, right? In my relationship and my own sex life with my spouse, and are kind of hurting at the end of this 5 tips for a healthy sex life talk. So what would you recommend as kind of first steps for them, and what resources do you offer for somebody that really is thinking at this point, I need some help?
Wow, totally. I think the first thing I would say is find just any sliver of hope you can hold on to in your mind. Try to open your mind up to the idea that healing really is possible, and that it can be in the future so much better than it is now. I have seen couples make incredible improvements in their sexual relationship and overall relationship, and they also felt like maybe we're too far gone. It's really, really bad right now. It could never be that. But it really can be. I believe it can be. If we have partners who are willing and who care about each other, the amount of improvement that can happen is so incredible. So try to find just a sliver of hope, and we'll hold on to that little sliver as we, take additional steps. As far as resources go, there are so many good places to turn now for help. I have resources for couples. You can find them on my website. There's several free ones. I also have paid resources if you're wanting to really invest and do some deep dives into your sexual relationship. So my website is thechristiansexeducator.com. And if you just click in the menu on the married tab, you can find all my free resources and paid resources for married couples. But I'm not the only one who offers really good resources. There are a lot of people now who are trying to help couples in this space. Two of my very, very favorite books that might be a good first step for couples to take, reading one of them together. For those who are Christian or who grew up in a high demand religion and have some guilt maybe attached to sex, or feel like they have some unhealthy dynamics in their sexual relationship, like duty sex is one, like we talked about.
Yep.
The book, The Great Sex Rescue by Sheila Gregor, is phenomenal. It's so helpful at helping you recognize negative beliefs about sex that you may have internalized, and then replacing those with healthier beliefs about sex as a couple. So that's a really good one. Okay. If you are someone who struggles with low desire and you feel like, I never want sex, surely there's no hope for me. There really is. And I would recommend the book Come As You Are by Dr. Emily Nagoski. That book is primarily focused on understanding and increasing sexual desire. It's written primarily for women, but can be helpful for anyone.
Yeah.
That is
what man would not want to understand, like how
totally
would it
Again, I think these should be read as a couple, or at least read individually and then discussed. Yeah. They are so good. So that's another resource that I think can be really helpful.
Have your own marriage book club about sex.
Yes. Yeah.
Sounds great. I'm game for that.
Yeah, that also can help the conversations come more easily. If you are a couple that struggles with sexual communication, reading something and then discussing it can help you get more comfortable with the vocabulary and just with having conversations about sex. But it kind of takes some of the pressure off because you're discussing somebody else's ideas about it, right? You're discussing the book.
Yeah, true.
Not discussing the most vulnerable desires. And
the book said that,
right.
What did you think about what the book said?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. I'll put all of these recommendations in the show notes. So if you're listening and you want to have easy links to those, make sure you check out the show notes for that. And then I have 3 fun questions to end with. You ready for that?
Yes.
Okay. What is your favorite way to de-stress?
2 things come to mind. Sunshine is the first one.
Amen.
Sunshine heals me. And I know you're in Missouri and I'm in Utah, so probably neither of us are getting a ton of sunshine right this very second.
So cloudy outside right now.
Yes. The sunshine is starting to come. If I'm having a really stressful day and I can just go on a 10-minute walk and it's sunny outside, it does so much good for my heart. It really does. Good one. I am also a very touchy person. Physical touch is my number one love language. And there is something about just cuddling with my husband that somehow I feel like my stress levels decrease so dramatically. I'll just be like, can you just hold me for 5 minutes? Right. And it's like my heart syncs with his slower heartbeat when I'm feeling really stressed, and it just helps me really calm down.
Yeah. I saw a reel about that one time. It's started out with all this chattery noise in the background. She snuggles up with her husband and all the
Yes, that is
It's like
so
my mind when I snuggle. And I was like, I totally get that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know some people are like so not into snuggling and they're like, no, that would not help me, but it definitely helps me.
Yeah, that's a great one. What is your go-to morning drink?
I'm so boring. Water.
Yeah.
I sometimes will make a smoothie, but I've like tried some of the, like morning greens and different things. My sisters are really into like
All the drinks and stuff.
all the things. And every time I try them, I have a very, very active gag reflex, and drinks really gross me out. So every single one of those healthy drinks I try, I'm like, this is not worth it. I can't do it.
That's so funny. Yeah, my morning drink has changed over the years, but I'm also very picky about powders and mixes and things like that.
Yes.
It has to be really good.
Yeah. Tell me what your morning drink is right now.
I'm kind of we drink mud water a lot of mornings, which is like an adaptogenic.
I've had mud water.
Yeah,
it's actually not as terrible as most of them.
Yeah, it's not terrible. It takes some getting used to, but it does make me feel good. And if I don't have that, I'll have an herbal tea. And I also have a lot of water in the morning too. So
not very a page out of your book, since you're the health guru.
Well, so if I want something warm, it's like some mornings I just wake up and I definitely want something warm. So I'll have hot mud water or hot tea with my water.
Especially during the winter, I feel like that's
yeah. Last question. Who would you love to see as a guest on the Daily Wellness Podcast?
Well, if you are wanting to do another sex episode at some point, one of my other favorite people in this space, her name is Ariel Finlinson. She is the host of the Ladies Talking Love podcast, but she also does podcast interviews. And she speaks a lot specifically to women who really struggle with desire. She's kind of walked her own path of finding a desire for sex and learning to love it when previously she didn't in her marriage. So she has a really, just really relatable approach to this, but also a really hopeful message. So she's the person that came to mind.
Awesome. Thank you for the recommendation. Yeah. Appreciate that. Thank you for doing what you do. I am always encouraged when I see your content, and I just think that you do what you do so gracefully, and I know it's helping so many people. So keep it up.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And thanks for what you do as well.
My pleasure. Thanks for listening to today's episode on the Daily Wellness Podcast. We hope that you found it helpful for your own wellness journey. And if so, we'd love for you to leave a review. Then come back and listen for review shoutouts on upcoming episodes. For more information, check out the show notes and connect with us on our website, dailywellnesscommunity.com.